Do you remember the title of our current series 49? If not, it is 144,000 is real. The name of this, our second study of the series, shall shortly follow. Beforehand, I welcome you this Sabbath afternoon from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. Today, April the 22nd, 2023. Revelation chapter 7 and 14 disclose God's first fruits. The 144,000 and the church is baffled. It may indeed seem strange that after 6,000 years of God's arduous labor, that the roster of the redeemed would yield exactly 144,000. Beyond that, we ask, why are the redeemed expressed in such a mathematically immaculate equation? 12 times 12,000 to yield 144,000 saints. How many people can even perform at that high level of math? It is evident that God applies special significance with the number 12 and with Israel. But in Gentile jealousy, they fretfully grumble to ask, why must the 12 segments of 12,000 that total 144,000 exclude Gentiles? So theologians are tempted to suggest that this number is not real, but is symbolic. They forget that God did say, and I quote from Deuteronomy 32, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. Therefore, God premeditated that exact number. This study does what none else have ever so done. It resolves our curiosity and cynicism to give us peace in God's zeal to save all of humanity. With new light, it will show that the 144,000 are to be forged as first fruits because they will be God's ultimate agency of global evangelism. We can know this for a certainty because the Lord promised to Abraham, and I quote from Genesis 26, and in thy seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Genesis 26, verses 4 through 5. With this promise, the salvation equation is expressed as a dichotomy. Dichotomy is an either-or situation. Either one is among the blessing takers, or he is among Abraham's seed, the blessing makers. Christian evangelicals erroneously apply this promise to the people whom they call the Jews. So in the book of Revelation, God defeats their presumptions and lists not just Judah, Jacob's fourth son, but all the 12 tribes. The evangelicals swole with conceit, add even more apostasy to their error. In their advocacy of Donald Trump's vision of world governance, they embrace the opposite of God's zeal to bless all nations. What do I mean? They cling to the tyrannical values of the Confederate flag. And worse still, they attribute supremacy not to God, but to their skin complexion, causing a denigration of all other men. During the Gentile era, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants were tested with world dominion. But now the universe has witnessed their dereliction in this regard. As just one example, in their evil spirit of tyranny, rather than celebrating God's gift of a royal seed, they, by subterfuge, as reported by the very mother of the child, sought to burn to death the 2-year-old royal son born to Prince Harry through Meghan Markle. Why? Because he had traces of African in his roots. Ergo, it is proven they are the antithesis to the Abrahamic commission. They are men who cannot bless themselves, their own royalty, let alone the nations. This analysis reveals God's wisdom to exalt the 144,000. So as to defeat human bigotry by righteous standards, he's forged a plan to orchestrate world evangelism. God's saving plan is now exposed. It says, and I quote from Revelation 14, verses 3 through 5, the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth, these are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Again, Revelation chapter 14, verses 3 through 5. In this text, we have God's specifications for his new Christian evangelicals. Criterion that must be added to those given originally by Moses 3,500 years ago, so as to define the admission into the preset limits of the Hebrew kingdom, and so as to define the 12,000 today that are to emerge from each tribe. Ergo, a saint should not feel slighted to repine. Why my brother and not me? Does not Christ love me? We are both sinners who have now returned back to God. We both desire to embrace the law and the testimony. Thus we both stand on Mount Zion. To boot, we both have suffered long years of tribulation under the yoke of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian Confederacy. Why is my brother counted and not me? Such is the vain lamentation of a spiritually wounded saint. And Ellen G. White warned Christians to themselves also avoid such spiritual contention. She states, Christ says that there will be those in the church who will present fables and suppositions when God has given grand, elevating, ennobling truths which should ever be kept in the treasure house of the mind. When men pick up this theory and that theory, when they are curious to know something it is not necessary for them to know, God is not leading them. It is not his plan that his people shall present something which they have to suppose, which is not taught in the Word. It is not his will that they should get into controversy over questions which will not help them spiritually, such as who is to compose the 144,000. This, those who are the elect of God will in a short time know without question. Ellen G. White, Once Elected Messages, page 174 and 75, written in 1904. What does she mean? Not help spiritually? How could meditation on a Bible doctrine become a hazard? I'll tell you how. The ordained Gentile gospel purveyors, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, elevated to a station of leadership in world evangelism, had one problem. They hated the very people whom Paul says was to be God's elect, Israel. Thus, the mission to evangelically uplift the very people whom they despised would have chased them away from God's vineyard and forestalled their primary assignment, the evangelism of all Gentiles in the appointed time of the Gentiles. Wisely, then, God hid the identity of the 144,000 until today. Ergo, we have so much mystery surrounding that number. Now, to participate in Abraham's blessing, Christians are challenged in the mandate to circumcise themselves from their speculative and false theories. Surprisingly, One theory in need of circumcision is the presumption of false valor. What do I mean? I say it will surprise you that the 144,000 are presumed to be that which they are not. They're presumed to be a hallowed people. Mustard seed adherents, having embraced God's grand, elevating, ennobling truths, using Ellen G. White's nomenclature, and no better. Ye will see shortly my meaning. Before so delving into the full reality, let us examine the other standards heaped upon the tribes of Israel presented by Moses when he was commissioned to count Israel. I refer you to Numbers chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. And the Lord God spake unto Moses on the first day of the second month in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel, after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel. Numbers chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. Anciently, when he numbered the tribes, there were also many people in the same camp of Israel who were excluded. There were saints deemed unfit to go to war, such as women, children under 20, disabled regardless of age, and non-Hebrews called therein the mixed multitude. The battlefield today is about to wax hot, and we shall include that battle also in this series. But let it be settled. There is no place for women to bear the burden of wielding the sword of warfare. You must be fit to go forth to war. Christ has other assignments for his ladies. Thus I give the title for this study. It is the 144,000, God's Special Forces. The book of Revelation describes the standard qualifications to fight the forces of Satan. But I first remind you that the book of Revelation was given to John, the disciple, by the power of the highest, by God. That should mean something. It says, and I quote from Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ which God gave unto him. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. Again, Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. Therefore, Father relayed the additional specifications about the 144,000. Shall we read them again? It says, These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Revelation chapter 14, verses 4 through 5. In other words, the 144,000 tribal membership demands spiritual virginity. And this refers to men of spiritual purity, men who have never been overshadowed by any other male power, spiritual or human. Many such violators of this rule, though they shall be loved, accepted, and redeemed, will still not qualify under the precise terms for inclusion. Why? Because God has standards. He will not deploy in his special forces the former registrants of Satan's battalions. Men who, by Masonic initiation or other debasements, have given up their bodies yesterday to defiling spirits. Satan accordingly will not be able to insinuate his impress to steal their valor. God wants the glory. Therefore, he demands that they were never beforehand been so contaminated by masonry, by witchcraft, by idolatry, or homosexuality. Also, another standard is that they must have what he calls no guile. What is guile? It is deception. As Eve told God, the serpent did beguile me. Genesis chapter 3, verse 13. In other words, they are not like the Fox News reporters, people who will make up falsehood to protect their evil machinations, namely to buttress their support for 666. Proof of their evangelical villainy is that such men, at the cost of millions of lives, even falsified the severity of COVID to forestall inoculation and did so for political expediency. I tell you, there are people who cannot bless the nations. Of them, the Bible condemns when it says, "Wherefore hear the word of the Lord, ye scornful men that rule this people which is in Jerusalem." An expression we can explain later on in our studies. "Because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with hell are we at agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves." Isaiah chapter 28, verses 14 through 15. To the contrary, to be enlisted in the 144,000, one shan't love and maketh a lie. But don't get me twisted. Such does not mean that they have never believed lies. It simply means that when falsehood is defeated by irrefutable evidence, and this is something we in the Adventist community can relate to over our last 100 years, 80 years of evangelism. When falsehood is defeated by irrefutable evidence, the righteous cease to feign to others that their debunked theories still have virtue to be cherished. Each tribe among the 144,000 will bypass their pride to disdain defeated errors, allowing them to stand before God without fault. For God did say, "For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie." That's Revelation 22, verse 15. The people who eagerly and willfully ignore evidence, as did Eve, become beguiled by the serpent. They accordingly do have guile, which disqualifies them to be numbered among the 144,000. But we must not overestimate. We must understand that the 144,000 do not have a halo. They're not angels. They are merely the first fruits who are to be harvested by Revelation's symbolic angels, men whom the Bible symbolizes as angels. In this finding, we defeat the dispiriting speculations of the theological pundits. By mere conjecture, they give the 144,000 a fake halo. This even though the Bible never vaunted them to be a people who are divinely glorified saints. I tell you, the 144,000 is real. They are people who, under the Gentile gospel dispensation yesterday, were disdained, people of God's severity. Therefore, when their Redeemer leaves Zion, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they will be his first to be redeemed. Did not Jesus say in Matthew chapter 19, quote, "But many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first." Thus others, a great multitude, will be secondary targets of evangelism so as to receive a lower station in the kingdom under the august body of the 144,000. But speaking of highest estimation, the symbolic angels who gathered them are the true saints of lofty grandeur. They are the men worthy of nobility, the halo-sporting dignitaries which leave Zion as good Samaritans to rescue them. They are given status above the 144,000. Let's think now. Simple logic dictates, and you must agree, that the supreme men are to be the human angels, the reapers, who harvest the first fruits. Of them, Revelation chapter 7 says, verse 2, and I quote, I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, saying, hurt not till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Revelation chapter 7, verses 2 through 4. In this text, the reaper is described as an angel of ascension. He shows the day when the 144,000 begin school under his tutelage, so that 7 chapters later in Revelation 14, they receive their graduation stoles, their seal. Prior studies have proven the time lapse from school to graduation. It is a period of 42 months, the time it shall take to dispel all guile, so that they may stand on Mount Zion. Ergo, the angel of ascension from the east deserves the honor. And Psalms chapter 8 shows exactly why. He tells us that angels are higher than humans. It says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels. Again, Psalms 8, verses 4 through 5. Maybe in communism, men are thought to be all equal, but God shows his favoritism, his men of honor. Thus did Christ say, from John chapter 4, quote, and he that reapeth receiveth wages. Where's my salary, Lord? He says, and he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth, and that's Christ, and he that reapeth, that's another person, may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, one soweth and another reapeth. John chapter 4, verse 36 through 37. Those earthbound human agents of Zion shall rejoice with Christ, the sower. This is their exaltation. They courageously venture forward to seal the 144,000. Christ in John 6 first mentions this future seal. He says, and I quote, labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. John chapter 6, verse 27. So we see the sealing angel, as is more fully depicted in Book 7, Trumpet Luminescence, also now ascending on your screen. He ascends from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the eastern quadrant of America, the land which Revelation chapter 13 manifests as the land of the two-horned beast. You may ask, why should any believe that the adherents of the mustard seed Advent are angels, or men who are worthy of world honor? Shocks some people, but because they are Davidians. And as ye shall see, David is a man after the Lord's own heart. Let us elaborate on that point as we advance in the study downstream. Joel 2 gives to us even more definition of these angels, the world's greatest men and women ever. Before I cite it, let me just make mention of the fact that every nationality has had an opportunity to become such angels. But being beguiled and loving lies, they refused to accede to the Adventist 1844 movement. They were given overwhelming Bible evidence to convict them, so that either by resurrection or by translation today, they could now become commissioned to leave Zion so as to rescue Israel. Such a progressive step wins world valor. It says in Joel chapter 2, and I quote, "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. For the day of the Lord is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains. A great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify fast, call a solemn assembly. Let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, say, Spare thy people, O Lord, and give not thine heritage to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Wherefore should they say among the people, Where is their God? Then will the Lord be jealous for his land and pity his people." Joel chapter 2, verses 1 through 18. Time will not allow for a full exegesis, such has been given in prior publications. Our purpose now is to explain the 144,000 and their advocates. But it is worthy to note, for those who have counting skills, that there are at least two principal actors contained in this text. One, the trumpeter who sounds the alarm in Zion, and two, the saints therein who respond before darkness forecloses on Zion. They are promised to be the great people and the strong in the history of the world. For it says, none before them nor after them have exceeded in their greatness. The bottom line is that God's people, Israel, cannot exceed them in greatness or honor. For Israel, we are promised, they shall not be redeemed until the first category of saints turn their hearts so that they may plead to the Lord for their rescue. To reiterate, it says, "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, say, Spare thy people, O Lord, and give not thine heritage to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Wherefore should they say among the people, Where is their God? Then will the Lord be jealous for his land and pity his people." Let it not be forgotten, the Gentiles are Jesus' constituted people. However, Israel will always be the Lord's designated saints of his chosen honorarium. To understand, it bears repeating. One must first differentiate between Christ and Jesus, between the God of the Gentiles and the Old Testament God who appointed Jacob. Many scriptures prove this point, but Moses said it most succinctly. And I quote from Exodus 3. "I, God, am come down to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Egyptians. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations." You think that includes our generation? Exodus chapter 3, verse 15. Hence, Christ will honor his commitment to Israel, for such is his eternal memorial. Woe be it to those detractors who claim that Israel, the 144,000, have been eternally banished by God, swallowed up in the genetic pool of their captivity. Accordingly, Paul promises that the deliverer shall leave Zion, the seventh Adventist church, to turn away ungodliness in Jacob. Thus, It is not just Israel, but the 144,000 shall be the chosen elders of purity from within that general body, Israel. And when they are sealed, these sons of America's former slaves will become heaven's new commissioners to evangelize the world so as to declare the three angels' message. E.G. White gives more insight to define the purpose of the 144,000, to show their newly acquired evangelical credentials that they have won by their baptism by fire. And she says, many of the black race have been rich in faith and trust in God. They have manifested divine compassion for those whom they could help. They have known what it was to hunger for sympathy and help. For they were neglected by those who saw their wretchedness and could have helped them, but who passed by on the other side, as the priest and the Levite passed by the bruised and wounded one. There are souls among the colored race that can be reached, and the very kind of labor which their circumstances require should be put forth, that they may be saved. When these souls are converted to the truth, they will become partakers of the divine nature and will go forth to rescue their fellow men, to lead those who are in darkness into the light. They can be helped in their low estate and in their turn can contribute to the good of others. Ellen G. White, Southern Works, page 29. The point must be emphasized. Their mission shall be to evangelize by heaven's higher standard. To understand, you must know that God loves the world, red and yellow, black and white. All are precious in his sight. And the men sent to be heaven's saviors require not the error of racial supremacy, but Christian humility. They must not be high-minded. The Christian world now clamors to understand the 144,000, and now they have the explanation that will help them spiritually. And once the Lamb's Father's name is written in the foreheads of the 144,000, as defined in Revelation 14, their mission of evangelism shall begin. Does it not say in Revelation chapter 14, and I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation. To where? Every nation and kindred and tongue and people. Revelation chapter 14, verse 1 through 6. Without more digression, this is the addendum to the three angels' message of Revelation 14, which is the dominant theme of historic Adventism throughout their 190-year history, which only now can be broadcasted. Why now? Because yesterday they never fully understood it. Ergo did the prophetess to Adventism, Ellen G. White, give the following promise. And I quote, "The 14th chapter of Revelation is a chapter of the deepest interest. This scripture, not now, I interrupt, this scripture will soon be understood in all its bearings. And the messages given to John the Revelator will be repeated with distinct utterance." Ellen G. White, Review and Herald, October 13, 1904. Here we are promised that one day we will understand Revelation 14 more fully. Today that day has arrived. Necessary to its fruition is the integration of real Israel into the Adventist Gospel Commission. They are to replace the elders so that the vestment of world evangelism meets God's standard. They will be men who will actually honor the gospel commission given in Matthew 28. And I repeat, quote, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you." Matthew 28, verses 19 through 20. To so baptize and teach, one must first know the Father and the Son's identities, their names. It must be written in their foreheads. And to teach men to observe all things that Jesus has commanded is to respect the testimony of Jesus. Some will dare to cry racism, but that charge is invalidated by the fact that white people were given the chance to rule over the 144,000. And some have accepted that offer. Remember, the 144,000 are to be his first fruits, not the highest in the kingdom. E.G. White shows what this study proves from the Bible. She said, when these souls are converted, they will become partakers of the divine nature. Partakers with whom? With those Adventist saints since 1844 who have erected Zion. Such was their chance to validate their high-minded superiority that they may be vaulted over America's former slaves, if such was their honorable mission. And this speaks to the Lord's controversy with his people. Adventists were ordained to be the deliverers, just as Paul prophesied when he said, I quote again, "There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob." Romans 11:26. How dare then any evangelist charge God with racism when they themselves, because of that very vexation, refuse to honor their evangelical calling, and instead they, quote, "pass by on the other side, as the priests and the Levites passed by the bruised and wounded one," to again cite Ellen G. White's parlance. And so, shirking today, they have fallen under the accursed Confederate flag of white supremacy. Their demotion, I say, is of their own making. In the past 190 years, Seventh-day Adventists advanced the strongest arguments to promote many unanswered Bible doctrines. Yet the Christian churches refuse to circumcise their hearts and to therein walk. Thus anybody, even white supremacists, were invited to rule over Israel. The diversity of my disciples makes this point. This is so, though I would have served to reform their hatred and compel them to heed Paul's counsel to be not high-minded and vain. So today we are realizing that the Adventist Commission is a seat above the 144,000. In this last hour, an hour to God, you know from recent studies, is defined as 42 years. In this last hour, we have become heart circumcised to accept this, the mustard seed message. Of this hour, the prophet Isaiah gave this very faith to us when he, in Isaiah 56, said, and I quote, "Neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, The Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch," the who? "Neither let the eunuch say, Behold, I am a dry tree. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuch," speaking to the sexually disoriented community, "For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant." What did they do? They take hold of the covenant. "Even unto them will I give in mine house and within my walls a place and a name better than of sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord, to serve him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. For mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. Isaiah chapter 56, verses 3 through 7. The reality is that by this promise of fairness, Christ is exonerated before the universe for making Jacob the faithful steward on earth, the fairest of the sons of men. For he, Jacob, is not controlled by the hecklers, but by his honor. Accordingly, very few Gentiles, because of the obstacles of their own hatred and the headlock of their own neck braces, will prove to be carnally minded saints who cannot give full service to God. Did not Romans 8 tell us? For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 8. In this faltering, they will fail to win high status for themselves in a station above the 144,000. Yet it will all work out for the best, because for Jacob, his seed will not hesitate to bless all of humanity. Ever so desirous in the day of resurrection to see the son of David born to their progeny, there being Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they shall be pleased in the final resolution, pleased that bigotry has precluded the Gentiles to excel above their Jacob's heritage, his children. Why have so many faltered on this path of graduation? They've rejected the testimony of Jesus, all claiming to be Christians, but still they've rejected the testimony of Jesus and refused to believe that the 144,000 is real. Accordingly, the plan of salvation is made known today. More evidence to prove that the 144,000 will have superiors over them in the kingdom. Christ promised to reward his disciples with a position above them. And I quote from Matthew chapter 19. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? And Jesus said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, he also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Matthew chapter 19, verses 27 and 28. In case the point has failed to resonate, 12 disciples shall judge Israel, not during the days of their degeneracy, but today in the time of their regeneration. To argue then that Israel has been eternally banished is to make a firm stand against this text founded in the testimony of Jesus. Another point now can be made to be equally salient. God so designated this post to the original 12 disciples. Are you a disciple? How then can you preside as a judge when yesterday's disciples already meet that standard? To answer, you need theological algebra. Remember, Judas was subtracted. Thus, we must solve for his variable, the X factor. The new equation for discipleship is as follows. 11 plus X equals 12. The plurality of disciples who belong to the mustard seed shall be the missing variable. X because they are proven to be Israel's harvesters. You ask, how could they be construed as one person? Answer, by algebraic theology. Christ asked the Father to so honor us, the saints who believe on him, by the testimony that the other 11 left on record. Speaking of the 11, he said in John chapter 17, and I quote, I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world, and they have kept thy word. For I have given unto them the words which thou gavest me, and they have received them. I pray for them. I pray not for the world. Take a moment to let that point resonate. I pray for them. I pray not for the world. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one. And the glory which thou hast given me, I have given them, that they may be one even as we are one. John chapter 17, verse 6 through 10, and verses 20 and 21. Let these words be etched in stone. To be a disciple indeed requires that you respect the testimony of Jesus, that which he delivered to the world 2,000 years ago through his 11 disciples. We all must believe on Christ, not by the Pope, nor by E.G. White, nor by V.T. Hatta, and especially not by 666 and his advocates, the evangelicals, but we must believe on Christ by the magical words recorded for us by his original 11 disciples. Those who so do, we have shown, are Zion, men who have the law and the testimony. They are the X factor. But a special parenthetical notion must be added to this already complicated equation. To judge one of the 12 tribes means more than just to judge the 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. Remember, there are tribal members who are excluded from God's special forces. The young, the infirm, the women, the beguilers, the spiritual non-virgins, et al. They too must be judged along with the 144,000. A disciple will judge the evangelist and the others so as to finish the gospel cry. This promise comes directly from God's throne through the designated disciple, John. And again, we stand in God's favor by believing the words of Father that have been received by the original 11. Remarkably, the number 144,000 is a revelation by way of a multivariable mathematical equation. Good thing you studied algebra, huh? The number 144,000 is the answer to a word problem, one that requires the solution of 12,000 times 12. The confusion of the religious world, men who cannot even count from 0 to 3, so as to uncover the three personalities of divinity, cannot balk at this finding. So obtuse are they that, when told by Christ, I will pray the Father, and he shall send you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever, John chapter 14, verse 16, they only can see by their own phony algebra one Lord. To them, he is saying that he, Christ, will pray to himself as his own Father, asking himself to send not the Comforter, but himself. Is it any wonder, then, that a higher scientific methodology, that of multiplication, escapes their grasp? Such would not be a matter of ridicule if it were not for the fact that these same men dare to impeach God's revelations about the total number of his special forces. 1700 years ago, Emperor Constantine gets a pass. He was a recent convert from paganism. But the Bible reference cited above was given by a disciple. Thus, to be included in Christ's prayer for his glory and unity, we must believe the words John received from Christ, especially since John has already answered Constantine's trepidations about polytheism by the very words that Christ also gave to him, John. Instead, Father, Christ, and the Comforter can indeed be separate personalities, and still each can be worthy of our worship. We merely need to embrace the theme of power of attorney. For Christ said, and John recorded, and I quote from John chapter 5, "For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son, that all men should honor the Son." That all men should honor the Son. How, John? That all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son, honoreth not the Father, which hath sent him. John chapter 5, verses 22 through 23. Hence, to call Jesus or Christ or the Comforter God exactly fulfills Father's demands that we honor them as we would honor himself as the Father. Rather than compliance, they compound the sin. For to further argue that Israel has been dissolved by 3,000 years of dispersion is to, as an evangelical Christian, disrespect Matthew's record promising Israel's regeneration. There is no escaping the fact. To deny Israel's regeneration is to pretend to know the science of genetics. But what are the chances that men so bereft of math skills would have a mastery in that subject? Zero. Still, more explanation on the 144,000 is accordingly required. Some do deserve credit for searching to match the tallies of Israel given elsewhere in the Bible and comparing it with God's tally in the book of Revelation. Such is the requisite of a Bible search. They quote Genesis and Numbers and Ezekiel, etc., so as to suggest that because those books list different rosters of the tribes and being bereft of the intensity to solve for X, they sidestep the component of theological algebra and impugn God's wisdom. I ask you, cannot different measuring standards be deployed for different measuring projects? Yes, especially in the day when this one man is promised to teach them again the first principles of the oracles of God. Sadly, such men of high-minded egotism who cannot be retaught shall be dismissed. Those other tabulations in the Bible to which they cite were given to designate tribal territory, a different motif than is Revelation's synopsis of evangelical garrisons. The gathering of the elders of Israel gives the pivot point. They historically congregate away from their homeland. Thus, it would be silly to map out where their homeland is and count them as a buttress against the doctrine of Revelation 14. They congregate away from their homeland so as to assemble in Jerusalem. Jeremiah gives us just a glimpse of this detachment by assembly. He said in chapter 3 of Jeremiah, and I quote, "Backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah." I want those words to resonate because it shows the distinction between Israel and Judah, right? At the end of the day, Jeremiah prophesied that backsliding Israel has justified herself more than treacherous Judah. Return, thou backsliding Israel, saith the Lord. I will take you, one of a city, and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. In other words, he's not going to uplift everybody in the tribes, but the segment that he selects, one of a city and two of a family. I will take you, one of a city and two of a family, and will bring you to Zion. And I will give you, I want you to catch this point, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 11 through 15. Not all of a family or a city, but only one and two are to be selected of the tribes to assemble in Jerusalem. A subject for another study, perhaps. But in this text, we also see the Lord's end-time distinction between the Jews and Israel. God here promises that instead of canceling all of Jacob's other sons and grouping them, as do the evangelicals, under the title the Jews, guess what he does? He instead regenerates the people whom he calls backsliding Israel, who are contradistinguished from their sister Judah. And he does more. He promises to feed them with knowledge and understanding by a people that are elevated above them, by Davidian pastors. For as all know, David was a man after God's own heart, and he gives them pastors, leaders after his own heart. Davidia is the highest light in Adventism. Advancing beyond, we should examine even deeper complexity. We should further discuss regenerate Israel in the light of Joseph. And I didn't say Jacob, I said Joseph. Was Jacob's beloved son born to Rachel? And then we'll discern more of the 144,000. He, Joseph, produced only 2 grandchildren for his father, Jacob. And being born to Pharaoh's daughter, we can know that they were of African heritage. Doused in today's ethics, some may wonder, did Jacob have the white Anglo-Saxon ethic to hate procreation by way of Africans? The answer is a resounding no. Jacob so beloved Joseph's sons that he did something very unique and special. Jacob gave to them their names were Ephraim and Manasseh, inheritance to be on par, not just with his other grandchildren, but higher, on par with his 12 other sons, extending his first generational progeny to 14. And Christ agreed. So the equation gets a little more complicated, doesn't it? So gracious was Christ that he made Ephraim to be not just one of the 12, but the leader over 10 tribe Israel, while Judah ruled the other 2 tribes of Jacob's duodecimo. Duo means 2. Decimo means 10, yielding a Latin word for 2 plus 10 equals 12. In this fact, we come to our algebra, our multiple variables that forge the 144,000. To see, we ask, do we have a conundrum? How can 12 equal 14? That aside for now, Christ, expressing his love for Ephraim, grieved over his very own severity. Christ said, and I quote from Jeremiah, quote, I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself thus. Thou hast chastised me, and I was chastised, as a bullock unaccustomed to the yoke. Turn thou me, and I shall be turned, for thou art the Lord my God. Surely after that Christ was turned. He says, I repented, and after that I was instructed. I smote upon my thigh. I was ashamed, yea, even confounded, because I did bear the reproach of my youth. Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a pleasant child? For since I spake against him, I do earnestly remember him still. Therefore my bowels are troubled for him. I will surely have mercy upon him, saith the Lord. Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 18 through 20. Christ has witnessed the struggle of the sons of America's former slaves. His heart is deeply saddened by the pain heaped upon them, because early in the years of his parentage of Israel, the epoch that he calls his youth, he was extreme in his severity, just as Paul so said. But now he promises to rescue him. Yet in spite of all this, Ephraim's name, by algebraic variable, is not listed in Revelation among the 12 tribes, which makes us to wonder, with such love, how could Ephraim be excluded from the 144,000? Also consider, when Jacob gave his end-time prophecies of prognostication, telling his children what would befall them in the latter days, it appears that he also excluded Ephraim. Why? And sometimes you need a teacher to unveil hidden messages. And this is what I refer to as algebraic theology, the power to solve for the X factor. We were told, quote, "Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein. Any who cannot perceive Ephraim in the list of the 144,000 is not the blessed reader and is devoid of the gravity to teach." Revelation does indeed include Ephraim, and so did Jacob. Beginning with Jacob, when he blessed his sons, and when he finally got to Joseph, he said, and I quote from Genesis 49, "Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall." Genesis chapter 49. What do you mean here, Jacob? Was not the point of your blessing of your children to tell them what shall befall them in the last day? Indicative of the fact that all of your 12 tribes, all of your 12 sons were to be genetically fruitful? Joseph's seed, Jacob would respond, eclipses the fruit-bearing capacity of the others. They, like a vine, was to run over the limit, over the wall. But what about Revelation? Since Jacob's 8th son, Joseph, gifted to Jacob only 2 grandsons, and since Manasseh, Jacob's grandson, and Joseph, his actual son, were both listed among the 144,000, then Ephraim is by definition accounted for under the auspices of Joseph, giving him the vine over the wall. Manasseh was thereon given 1 tribe, which means he was given 12,000. Therefore, Joseph and Ephraim are made synonymous, this by virtue that Joseph could only bear descendants through Ephraim. To mention one when considering this variable is to automatically include the other. A similar calculation occurred with Dan, causing men without the capacity to read the book of Revelation to cynically exclaim, "Dan is missing from the duodecimo." Look closer. He is there under the parameter of his brother Issachar, as explained more thoroughly in prior studies. According to Jacob's pronouncement of Genesis 49, the 2 became 1. Jacob so promised when he said, quote, "Issachar is a strong ass, couching down between 2 burdens. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel." Genesis chapter 49, verse 14 through 16. Both Dan and Issachar were only designated to comprise of one tribe. Thus, being conformed into one tribe, to mention Issachar is to also mention Dan. Each will be graced with a fraction of the 12,000 delegates to Issachar. Other technicalities aside for now, suffice it to say, the lesson of the 144,000 comes with complexities, just as do our own families, if you pause to think. You know, some families you come to and they ask, how many people in your family? They got to get out a calculator. God is the master of complexity, and his mysteries require that we spare no intensity to search out his meaning. Today, with this added fervor in study, we can now resolve that the 144,000, though first fruits, are to be redeemed because Christ has dedicated reapers to gather them. Ergo we, the mustard seed ministry, the Davidian pastors after God's own heart, also known as the disciples indeed, for whom Christ prayed to be made divine, are to be the greatest men in earth's history. And we must cherish that honor. Not being part of the number 144,000 has become a joy to us. But to receive our higher station, we must plead with God to redeem his children, that the heathen should no longer rule over them. Such a pleading is made real by this very study that has now been placed on record before heaven and earth. Hence, we can enter into our rest with the peaceful assurance that Israel shall orchestrate the righteous harvest of the globe. Jesus, after all, did command that we teach all nations of all things that he has commanded us. So the sower and the reaper can anticipate the day of our rejoice together. Let us meet again 3 weeks hence to undertake study 49.3. Until then, we close this hour with the knowledge that the 144,000 are God's special forces.